I'm Justin Davis, and this is Drone Camps RC. What's up, guys? Today it's all about this quad. It's the Eachine TYRO89. We're gonna build it, fly it, and I'm gonna show you some tips on how to set this one up, how to set up the VTX in the back with your dipole there. This quad is actually pretty beastie. It's running on 3 and 4S battery. Either one you want to go, all the way up to a 650 milliamp is possible. We have an F4 flight controller on here, 20 amp ESCs, and 1204 6000 kV motors. And I'm running the HQ 2.5 inch props. This will make it awesome on acro mode. So we can go up and do this power loop right here on the playground. No probs. It does nice beginner, easy style flying or some extreme acro stuff. Either way you want to go, it's $88. So let's go ahead and get started with the build. First things first, take everything out of your box and get it ready for your build. You're going to need a soldering iron, a solder sucker possibly, and we'll go ahead and start out with the frame here. And the ESCs go forward just like that. There is an arrow on there telling you which way it goes. And the motors plug in, but these standoffs were just a little bit too tall for me, so I used some shorter ones. That way it doesn't bend or break off of the frame in case of a crash. And you're just going to go ahead and put your screw through for each of those standoffs, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way around right here. Pretty easy to do, no soldering required right there. You're just going to drive those in. They're nice and firm, don't over tighten them, and it sets on just like that. Now we're going to screw on one single nut on the top, and now we have much less clearance. They shouldn't bend and break off at this point, and it's going to give me a little more clearance when I put the top stack on for my receiver in between the flight controller and the ESCs. Now we're going to use blue thread lock here for the motors. Let's go ahead and shake that up, dab a little bit out, get some on the tip of your bolt, and go ahead and run it through. We're going to do the first one and leave it kind of loose because we're going to move this. I'm going to make sure that this little collar right there doesn't rub on the frame. Make sure it's absolutely centered. Now we'll do the second bolt there. And we'll go ahead and tighten both of them now. And just take your time. Don't over tighten these. You don't want them to strip. That looks pretty good there. So now we can deal with the wire. And we're going to twist this up to shorten this wire just a little bit. You want to make sure that those are pins up when you plug them in. So this will be motor number 1. It's also nice that they include tabs on there. If you ever decide to put this on a different build, you can solder directly to the tabs, but that looks pretty nice. Now they should all 4 look like this once you're done. Just check out your work after you're done with each step. Now we're going to put on the XT30 and positive here and negative on this side. Go ahead and grab your capacitor, negative on that side, and that's going to be positive, not labeled. Just bend those down with a pair of needle nose pliers and push them straight through those holes right there. Make sure it's not touching the frame on the other side underneath there. So go ahead and add some solder on there first before we put on the battery cables. I'm just going to do each side there. And try not to hold it on there too long because sometimes these little tabs will separate off of your ESCs and that will completely destroy it. So that's looking pretty good there. Nice hold. Now we're going to go ahead and tin up the XT30 leads. A little bit of solder. Make sure you see it start to bubble, and then you know it's hot enough. Now I like to heat up the wire first before I touch it down to the tab. Some people will do this in the opposite fashion, but I find that I have less tab separation from the ESCs or a flight controller if I do it this way. Wire first, because it is a fairly big wire, and it takes a lot less heat to separate that tab. So now those look good. Give them a tug and tuck them underneath your frame just like this. And next we're going to twist this cable just one time and then bring it out the back just like that. Now take your zip tie, push it back just a little bit, and this will keep it from separating off of your ESCs. If you have a crash and your battery gets yanked off, this will save your ESC. The terminal tabs won't get pulled off. Now go ahead and snip that off. That looks pretty good. Nice. Nice and clean. Pretty easy. Now we're going to put the ESC harness on there. So again, pins up configuration there. Just push it in and that goes in the front. We'll just tuck that under later. Now it's time for your receiver. Go ahead, grab this cable and we're going to snip off this side. We don't need that servo lead. Now we're just going to pinch these off. Should have a couple millimeters of wire exposed right there. And they're going to go on just like this. So signal, 5 volt, and ground. Now we're going to tin these up because they have no solder on them yet. Go ahead and just put a little bit of heat there. And now we're going to go ahead and put our signal wire on first. That would be the S-bus wire. And now the 5 volt. And now you're going to solder up your ground wire. And give that a tug when you're all done, and it should be good to go. That's the easy part. Now we need to go ahead and bridge the S-bus side of these 3 tabs right here. And I messed up right here, so I used a solder sucker. And what I did was I just went ahead and put a whole bunch of solder on here, hit it with my solder sucker, and look at that. Perfectly back to normal. And now trying to bridge these 2 left pads, it is quite difficult to do, but it should look like something like this when you're done. That way, Betaflight's going to recognize your S-bus receiver. Otherwise, your receiver won't be noticed. It won't be noticed inside Betaflight, and you'll have no channel movement in your maps. So now we're going to go ahead and put these longer screws into the side of my Caddx Turbo EOS 2. I'm going to use that front hole right there. Kind of hard to see. You can use your cell phone to light that up and figure out where that hole is. That's usually what I do. Now just go ahead and drive that in there, but not too tight. Don't over tighten things. It's looking pretty good there on that side. I get my angle. I usually like to get my angle before I start really cranking them down. That's looking good. Perfect. Now we're going to bring this wire out the front. And that's where your flight controller is going to go, on those 3 posts. So the flight controller mounts up inside the camera canopy. And you'll see your USB port stick out the side there, like that. And the USB port is on the bottom, by the way, not on the top. It should look something like this. Now we're going to plug in the camera before we put it up inside there. So now we have the receiver and the camera plugged in. Now we need our VTX, and we're going to run that through the camera canopy, just like that. And that's going to be mounted on the back side of that camera canopy. So now we're going to plug it into this port, pins up, looking good. Really nice. Now your ESC harness should plug into the largest slot, pins up again. And now you're ready to install your flight controller. And actually, this board was on a 45, depending on what you're looking at as far as the arrow goes, but in Betaflight, everything was zeroed out and it flew exactly fine and checked out orientation wise. So those 3 screws there are the shorter ones that I used. I didn't use the longer ones there. Now I got to figure out how I'm going to put down my receiver. It's going to go in between the ESC and the flight controller there. And it should mount up something like this. We're just kind of mocking it up. Now let's go ahead and bind up your receiver. This is an XM Plus. This is the way you do it. Go into your model menu and go to CC FR Sky D16. 8 channels fine. And you're going to go ahead and press this gold button down with the driver. And click the bind button on your transmitter. Plug in a battery and you should see a green light just like this. Come up, red flashing is okay. Now when you plug everything in, it should be a solid green light. Sometimes if it's too close to the radio, you won't see a green light, so keep that in mind. Now it's time to check that your video is there. So I'm good on my video. I've got video. We'll set up the OSD and all that a little bit later, but right now we're just going to take a small strip of VHB and put that underneath the receiver to hold that in place. I usually take a razor blade and I peel off that red side. And now I'm routing, trying to figure out where I'm going to route these antennas. It's not really the traditional way I would do this, but we're just going to go ahead and do it front and back. Why not? I'm not going to be like super fancy here on this build. We just want this to be seen by the radio. So we're going to have those facing down, and any way the quad turns will have antenna. That looks pretty good. Nice. So now it's time to take these 3 longer posts and what looks like tall grommets, but that's just going to give this camera some dampening. And we're going to push all 3 of these posts through with a little bit of our rubber dampeners on there. We're going to take 3 nuts and put it across the top of each post, and make sure that the nut's flat when you're screwing it down sort of by your fingers. You're going to start out with your fingers And then you're going to hold the nut in place and use your driver to tighten everything up. That's looking pretty good. So far, pretty easy, right guys? Not bad. Now I'm just going to drive that in. And you want to see those flex a little bit when they're coming down. And it should look something like that. That looks pretty good. Nice. So now we're going to secure the VTX. Another piece of VHB on the back of that VTX. And we're going to peel back that red sticker off the VHB. And that's 3M VHB, guys. You can get it on Amazon and rolls. It's the best stuff in the hobby. Now that's down. We're going to just secure it again with a zip tie. And don't over tighten this because you don't want to damage your VTX chips on there. And I've done this to so many quads, so don't worry about it. Just as long as you're not pressing on that button. You never want one zip tie close to that button. That button could break off pretty easily, but you want your button accessible. So that's why I did it like this. And now another zip tie, and this is going to hold your dipole straight up. We don't want to go back into the props with that dipole. As you can see, I get my heat shrink from Harbor Freight. It's about $3 or $4. They might have raised the price recently, I think. But you're just going to go ahead and put that over top of your zip tie and the dipole. And this gives your dipole just a little bit of extra protection too. And I've had some pretty hardcore crashes with this type of setup. And usually it just bends backwards, and it just gives it a little more rigidity as well. It keeps it vertical while you're flying. So now we're going to go ahead and snip that extra piece off there, and that looks pretty good. So far your work should look something like this. Nice. That will keep it nice and vertical. Perfect. Now we're going to take another zip tie, and we're just going to go around this arm right here. And we're actually going to go over the motor wire. It's going to help hold those in place. Not worried about pinching them. Don't over tighten the zip tie, of course. They should be fine. And we can snip off a smaller piece of heat shrink and put it right over top of this antenna wire and your zip tie right there, all the way down to the base of the zip tie. And put some heat to it, shrink that down, and it should be coming out the bottom of the quad just like this. And now for the other one, on the other side, all the way down to the base of the zip tie. Again, put some heat to it. We're just about ready to fly, guys. This is awesome. One of the easiest builds that I've done, hands down. So now these are the props that come around with it. They go right turn rear. This is how it's set up. Left turn for the motor number 2. Motor number 3 is left turn as well. And motor number 4 is right turn. But I'm not going to use those props. We're going to use the HQ T65s because these are some of the smoothest and nicest efficient props, and you can still freestyle, and they're actually way faster than the stock props. You can see they're quite a bit skinnier. This old school prop on there, I believe it was a gem fan, that's just going to eat up a little bit more battery. Just going to go ahead and use, I'm going to use a little bit shorter screw. I'm going to crank those down, but not over crank them because you will strip these motors. And the hardware that comes with it, just be careful with your drivers because it's not the best hardware in the world. And I'm going to go ahead and seat that one. And I use my fingers usually to put them in and spin the prop around to find where the hole is for the bolt, and then go ahead and screw it in and look like this. Finally, it's looking pretty good here. And I forgot to put my strap in. Don't forget to put yours in. I did get it through there eventually. Now here is my Twig XL next to my Eachine TYRO89. Look at the difference, man. These canopies look very similar. It's kind of funny. It's like a little brother to the Twig XL. Now let's go ahead and put it on the scale and see what kind of weight we get. Quad first, without the battery. 88 bucks, man. This is awesome. 74 grams. And with the 3S450, 118 grams. Not bad, Eachine. So let's go ahead and do some Betaflight, guys. If you don't want to watch this part, that's fine. You can skip to the flying at the end of the video. But this is for my guys who need some help. So orientation first, left, right, forward, and back. Make sure that when you tilt your quad around, it's showing you the proper axis there. Because your flight controller could be out of whack. It is on UART 1 right there. It should be open there. And let's go to configuration. Now we're going to uncheck barometer. Don't need that. Leave accelerometer on. All this up here looks good. Motor stop needs to be off just like that. And we can change the arm angle to 180. In case you get it stuck in a tree, you can power it back up. And this looks good here. It's set to S-Bus already. Otherwise, it won't see your receiver because you have an XM Plus on there. Telemetry, OSD, anti-gravity, all that stuff we want on. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on RX set and loss there for an ESC type of beeper. Now you're going to go ahead and hit save and reboot. We're going to come back into Betaflight. And let's see, now let's go to the power and battery tab. We're just going to turn this down to 3.1 because I don't want it squawking at me when I do a punch out. When the battery sags, it will sometimes start beeping midair. And failsafe is set to drop, yes. Now we're going to go down to PIDs. We're going to leave those absolutely stock. I'm going to put this CLI dump down in the below in the description for you guys. Now this is out of whack. If you see this, it's set to TAR, and that's not correct for my particular setup. So I'm going to go down here to this tab. I'm going to select FR Sky right there, or Free Sky, however you'd like to say it. Now it should say AETR. Now hit save and watch what happens. It changes my channel map. So now everything should be moving right. Throttle, yaw, roll, and pitch. And you also have to check your switches. You need to set up 3 switches in your radio usually to fly. My first one's going to be my arm switch. And my second one's going to be my modes, and my third one's going to be my beeper. So this is what it comes stock set up like, and you can grab and move these little tabs, and you can drag it by the middle in case you're confused about that. So that's going to be aux 2, and that is my mode switch, and aux 1 is my arm switch. That's usually the big switch on the left hand side of my radio. So now everything is moving around. Good, looking good there. Now I'm going to add that beeper, the ESC beeper, because it doesn't have a physical beeper, so we're just going to have a chime from the ESCs. And this will work if you do it just like this. That looks good. Okay, if you need to go back and check which one is aux 1 or 2 or 3, just go back to receiver tab and make sure these tabs match up when you move your switches. So now we're going to go to beeper. We're going to add a range there and set that to aux 3. We're just going to scooch that over all the way to the end there. That's usually the 3rd position down. 1, 2, 3 across in 3rd position. Save that, and now my beeper's active. So if I lose it in the weeds, now I have a little beeper on there. Now we're going to go to OSD, and we're going to add a few things here. A lot of the times I don't use the warning. I usually turn off the warnings on mine, but I like battery voltage #1 because everybody needs to know what that is. Now let's just uncheck warning. And you can also add craft name. We'll talk about that in a minute. First, we're going to do fly mode. Just like to know if I'm in acro or stability. And usually I have both on a quad. If you're a beginner, you can start out with stability mode. And by the way, stability has its own mode there in the modes menu, but acro is not labeled there. So if you're adding acro is just free floating inside that modes tab. So once you go off the end of, say, your little gold button moves over to the next position over and it's free floating, that means you're in acro mode. Kind of weird, I know. Now we're adding the name of the quad, and that's the craft name. You go to the configuration tab there, type in the name of your quad. I'm just going to put Tyro89 on mine. Now I'm going to save and reboot and come back in. And now when we go back to the OSD, you should see the name of your quad there, not craft name. Awesome. You can also go into the fonts menu, and you can change the font inside your OSD, which is cool. I'm just going to make this bold here. Now press upload font, and now I'm going to see more of a bold font on my quad's OSD. Nice. So now it's going to take me back in. I'm going to go back to OSD, and you don't see it changed here, but once you plug in a battery, you'll see it on your goggles. Now let's go to the CLI, and we're just going to check the version on the flight controller. Nice, Maytech. I believe that was Maytech. And now we're going to do a dump for you. So type in DUMP, and DUMP will give us all of the settings that we just did on this quad. So I'll put this link down below. You guys can copy this and paste it into your Tyro 89 and then hit save, and it'll save all these same exact settings in yours. We're just going to go ahead and save it to a file there. And I'm going to call it Tyro89. I'll save that to a Google Doc drive for you guys. So that's looking pretty good. Not bad. Usually takes me about 5 to 7 minutes to set up a quad in Betaflight. Pretty quick these days compared to what it used to be like. So now I'm just going to do a quick motor check, and you need to check each motor. You can put a prop on there, but I wouldn't do that. I would put like a little flag on the motor and then test motor 1, motor 2, motor 3, and motor 4. Needs to be right turn rear. Remember, right turn rear. It's what we always say. Check all your motor directions. And I had motor number 1 and 2 were reversed. So you need to download BL Heli Configurator and make sure you close Betaflight first, or otherwise it won't open properly. So now we're going to go ahead and connect. You're going to need to plug in a battery and hit the connect button here. Go ahead and go in. Once you click that button, you'll see these 4 tabs here. And what you want to do for ESC number 1 is reverse that one. And we want to reverse number 2. So now we're going to click the right button. And now it's going to write it up at the prompt. When you see it's finished, you're all done. And when you disconnect, your quad will restart. So now, hopefully you have a quad that works, and I feel like we accomplished something today. So let's go ahead and see what $88 flies like. We're gonna start out on a 3S battery, but my problem with this 3S battery was that, yeah, it's brand new, but it was from a company that doesn't really make batteries, and this battery sagged out big time. I had the same problem with another battery that I got from this company. I'm not gonna name names right now because you guys aren't really buying these batteries. It was just pretty much a test battery, but we're gonna fly it anyway, even though it sagged down to 11.1 volts. This is about the performance still, even though it's sagging, that you can expect. You can power loop this quad on a 3S battery, and it's actually faster than I thought this quad would be, especially starting out on 3S, but I've flown similar 2.5 edition style quads before in the past, and in this playground, it is quite awesome. This is a great form factor for some playground flying. I'm also going to test out a 4S battery, and we're going to see if a 4S battery will cause the camera to jitter and give us some bad vibes, and we'll see how good the tune is on a 4S battery, because sometimes higher voltage like that will cause some issues with the tune. It might be tuned just for 3S and not 4S, but the good thing is we're going to find out about that. But on 3S, it flies great, and this battery is just about done. I really need to bring this one in and put it down. But so far, my first impression is that it's very capable. It feels like something that I bought as far as a bind and fly that I maybe would have got from similar companies like Happy Model or Diatone. I also like to mention that no longer the motor wires are those cheap plastic coated wires. They're actually nice silicone wires on these motors now, so thank God for that. Now we're on that 4S battery, and you can expect probably about 3.5 to 4 minutes on a flight. If you fly like me, you'll get probably 3 minutes flight time. And I'm going to put some batteries down below for this particular quad. I'm running this one from 550 milliamp up to about 650 milliamp for my testing, and that was the good longer flight time. The 650 is more of a cruiser battery. The 450 to 550 range is going to give you more of a freestyle edge if you want power to weight and not feel the battery as much when you're flying it. And now we're in stability mode. I just wanted to show the beginner guys that you can put it in stability mode, and this is honestly where most of you beginner guys should start out with. Flying your quad in stability mode, if you push the stick to one side or the other, it won't flip the quad, and you can actually kind of slow your quad way down and be able to do things like this. You can slow the quad down and really make some small gaps. Now this quad does not have prop guards, so flying through here at my own risk, of my propellers. And by the way, these are beautiful propellers. These T65s, they're my favorite, most coveted 2.5 inch prop right now of any prop in the industry. This is the one. I think I only have like 4 sets of these left, and I hope HQ's listening so they'll send me another bag of these because I put them on every single 2.5 inch quad so far at the end of late 2019 and now 2020. And let's go for that power loop. Coming out a little bit high there, but back under and through. Very capable, this quad, and it turns on a dime. The acceleration's great. Those 12 series motors are pretty hopped up, and so I feel like I have the best of both worlds here. I've got sort of a beginner style trainer or a fast rip and dip type of quad. I mean, this quad is beastie fast, and again, it reminds me of something that I could bind and fly, but I built it myself. And if you build one for $88 and yours flies like this on the stock PIDs, I think you're going to be pretty happy with it. And the reviews so far are 5 stars on Banggood and a few other places. This is probably, it's definitely one of the best Eachine sort of DIY, half DIY quads that they have out there. And I say half because you only had to do a little bit of soldering on this one. But yeah, taking some of those chances there and feeling this quad. I'm really feeling it. So I think it's good. It is definitely a thumbs up. I wouldn't say it's 2 thumbs up. I would say it's a thumbs up on my channel. And here comes security, school security about to kick me out, so guys. So that's the end of my review today, guys. Here comes the administrator. Is that a drone, sir? Yes, it is.